This story was sent to us by a real listener. It happened somewhere in East Asia, maybe in China, Japan, Vietnam, or Korea. They remember it clearly, and after you hear it, you will too. Welcome to Real VNightmare, where real people share the moments they'll never forget. This story was submitted to our channel by the person who experienced it. In a district on the western edge of Guangzhou, where the old textile warehouses still sit behind steel gates and red brick walls, there stood a family-owned cotton processing factory passed down from Zhao Mei's grandfather. Back in 2009, it wasn't just a factory. It was a small, self-contained world. 8 machines humming workers living in adjacent dorms. A little courtyard out front where incense curled each morning. Zhao Mei's parents, Mr. Zhao Wenliang and Madame Zhao, ran it with pride and discipline. They were respected among the local trade, and to their workers, they were like elder siblings. Then came that one early morning. It began with a spark. One of the cotton carter machines short-circuited. A trail of static leapt from metal to fluff, and in seconds, the dry piles of ginned cotton erupted like they'd been waiting for it. Flames danced up the walls across ceiling pipes and into the sleeping quarters upstairs. No time for hoses, no time for extinguishers. People screamed, ran some barefoot, some still in their pajamas. The fire department arrived quickly, but the damage was brutal. By the time the blaze was put out, the machine room was a blackened tomb. Workers were accounted for, most huddled together in the courtyard, coughing and stunned. All except one. Zhao Mei still remembers the silence when her mother, Madame Zhao, walked up and down the crowd with the roster counting aloud with shaking hands. Everyone, except one young man, the newest worker. He was just 18, scrawny, always wearing his cap low over his eyes. His name was Chen Alex, but everyone simply called him the Kid. I'm sure he just ran home to his mother, someone muttered, but unease clung like soot. Later that afternoon, the fire team returned from their sweep. One body had been found, a large charred dog. The factory had kept a big brown mutt that slept near the back room. Everyone sighed in grim recognition. But then came a second call. Another body. Human this time. Zhao Wenliang dropped everything and ran down. What he saw made his heart clench. The remains were unrecognizable, missing a head, one arm, and a leg. There was no way to visually confirm identity. But it didn't need saying. Only one person was missing. Still, protocol had to be followed. Zhao Mei, being younger and less emotionally rattled, called the boy's mother. She lived nearby, sold lottery tickets on the street, and hadn't heard a thing. He's probably just scared, she said on the phone. I'm going home to check. 10 minutes later, she called back, breathless. He's not here. Zhao Mei didn't have the heart to say it over the phone. Instead, she offered to bring her over just for peace of mind to talk to someone at the site. When the woman arrived and saw the white-covered shape lying under tarpaulin near the factory wall, she dropped to her knees without a word. Her grief didn't explode. It cracked from within, silent and collapsing like ash. What was left of Chen Alex was later placed in a simple coffin. The family helped cover funeral costs. Madame Zhao insisted on handling the altar, the offerings, and every last bowl of rice. The entire factory paused for a week. But something about it all clung too tightly to her mother. Weeks after Madame Zhao told her husband, "We need to ask the old master to come." That meant Master Wu, an elderly Taoist ritualist of Chinese descent, whom they'd consulted for years. He was known for worshipping the great sage equal to Heaven Sun Wukong himself. Not a common patron deity, but Master Wu was anything but ordinary. He never raised his voice. He never wore full robes, just a single brass bangle and an old scroll bag slung over his shoulder. When he arrived at the factory, he circled the outer wall 3 times, murmuring softly, a copper compass in hand. The workers watched from a distance. His final verdict came as he stood by the burned corner. The land, he said, is in energetic conflict with the land itself. You are sitting on a split line, forces tugging in opposite directions. And this place demands repayment. Repayment, Madame Zhao asked, her voice low. He nodded. Once every 10 years, someone here will be marked to die as someone else's proxy. That's the cost of this imbalance. Zhao Wenliang blinked. But we've had this factory for years. Master Wu raised a finger. Exactly 10 years ago. Your forklift operator, the one who died in the collapse. A jolt passed through them. They had never connected those events. It's not random, Master Wu continued. The site requires you to establish an offering altar for wandering souls. If you don't, another will be claimed in 2019. The evening after Master Wu's declaration, the air in the factory felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were listening. That night, Madame Zhao didn't sleep. She stayed seated by the family altar, incense burning low. Rereading the instructions Master Wu had written down in faded ink, place the altar in the northwest corner. Use white bowls, only light 1 red candle and 1 black one. Offer plain rice and unsalted peanuts for 30 days. By morning, the small table was set up with quiet reverence. Madame Zhao didn't just follow instructions, she bowed 3 times every night, whispered names she didn't know, and asked whoever was lingering to find peace. Please just leave the living alone, she muttered once, her voice cracking. It was around this time that strange stories began to ripple among the workers. The first came from a man in his 40s who had helped clean out the damaged room. I saw that kid, he said one night while lighting a cigarette in the courtyard. Chen Alex. Standing by the rusted tank. Just his shape, you know? He didn't look angry or nothing. But he was there. Another worker swore she heard knocking, rhythmic, deliberate, coming from inside the tool closet, even when it was padlocked. But the most unnerving tale came from Auntie Lan, the longtime kitchen matron who cooked daily meals for the staff. One afternoon, she pulled Madame Zhao aside, whispering, I saw her again. Who the girl? The one in the blue skirt. Madame Zhao stared. You mean the one from the dream you had? She's not just from a dream. Years ago, before that poor forklift man died, I saw her near the stove, just standing there. Long black hair, no face, and the rice spoiled that day. I knew something was off. This wasn't a first. Auntie Lan had quietly maintained her own rituals, offering spoonfuls of warm soup in a separate bowl, placing slices of banana near the old banyan tree beside the fence. She claimed the girl came only on days when someone was at risk. But that girl wasn't the only lingering spirit. According to Master Wu, 4 spirits resided within the factory walls: an elderly man, a young adult male, a female presence, and now Chen Alex. The 3 former deaths matched the factory's known past the forklift operator in 1999, a welder in 1989, and a vague mention from Mr. Zhao's own father about a girl who drowned in the drainage ditch. Before the factory existed, the timing was uncanny, every 10 years. One by one, they were all marked to die as someone else's proxy. This isn't a place haunted by malice, Master Wu explained. It's a cycle, bound by land silence and unpaid offerings. He added that some spirits choose to protect what they haunt, especially if honored. And soon proof arrived. About a week after the altar was set up, something strange happened. 3 different workers, unrelated and on different shifts. Each won modest prizes from the national lottery. One got 300 yuan, another 600, and the third over 200. At first, they thought it was coincidence until it kept happening. Over the next 10 days, 7 workers won small lottery prizes. One woman joked, "The ghost must like us," but others grew uneasy. This wasn't ordinary luck. They say Chen Alex liked buying tickets, one of the older men recalled. Used to spend half his paycheck on scratchers. Zhao Mei herself was skeptical until Auntie Lan pointed something out. The altar candle burns. Longer on days someone wins. Still, Madame Zhao refused to believe that a dead teenager was funding her staff's side income. Then came the dream. One of the younger workers, Mr. Gao, approached Madame Zhao after breakfast, pale and shaken. "Last night I dreamt of the kid," he said, "Chen Alex. He walked past the main gate, dragging his leg like it was stiff. And then he looked back at me, smiled, and waved." Madame Zhao felt the chill crawl into her chest. Did he say anything? No? But he was following someone. Who? A woman in gray robes, holding prayer beads. Her hands tightened around the cup of tea she was holding. That could only be Master Nun Jingyi, the gentle Buddhist nun who had come to the factory days earlier at Madame Zhao's request. She had led a chanting session at the altar and left quietly, saying little beyond, "Some are ready, some are not." Now it seemed at least one spirit had chosen to leave. Still the altar remained, and Madame Zhao continued her daily offerings, placing fresh fruit and pouring clear water under the red-black candle. She wasn't just doing it for the kid anymore. She was doing it for all of them. By the 3rd week after the altar was established, peace seemed to settle over the factory. The machines were cleaned, new fireproof walls were installed, and the workers slowly returned to their usual routines. But there was still a weight in the air, a kind of knowing quiet. No one spoke loudly in the evenings. No one lingered in the machine room after dusk. Then came an unexpected visitor, Madame Chen, the mother of Chen Alex. She hadn't returned since the cremation. Most thought she wouldn't. But that morning, she walked into the office holding a small red plastic bag and a framed photo of her son. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was steady. "I went to see someone," she said. She explained that after the funeral, neighbors pressured her with their own fears and gossip. Some whispered that her son had been murdered in the chaos. Others said the factory was cursed, and she should call him back to ask what happened. Eventually, Madame Chen gave in. She traveled to Zhuhai, where someone had told her about an old spirit medium who could lend her body to the dead. She didn't tell Madame Zhao right away. She wasn't sure if the story would sound absurd. But after the dream sightings and the unexplainable lottery wins, she no longer questioned what was real. The moment the medium started, she said the woman's face changed. Her posture bent just like my son's, and then her voice cracked. Then he asked me why I didn't burn his cap. Zhao Mei felt her spine go cold. The cap. That gray curved bill cap Chen Alex wore every day. The one he used to tilt low, shading his face. No one had thought to burn it at the funeral. Everything had been too rushed, too painful. Madame Chen sobbed. He said he couldn't see. That everything was too bright, and he had to cover his face. He begged me to send the cap. They both sat in silence. Then she added, "He said no one killed him. He saw the fire. He panicked. He ran and locked himself in the supply room. The smoke got in. That's how he... She couldn't finish. Madame Zhao gently reached across the desk, placing her hand over the mother's trembling fingers. "We'll burn the cap tonight, and whatever else he asks for." That night they held a quiet ceremony behind the dormitory. Along with the cap, they offered a set of small gifts, a toy scooter, a packet of instant noodles, his favorite, and a printed cutout of a desktop computer. Madame Zhao whispered the boy's name 3 times, lit the paper bundles, and watched the smoke curl into the sky. After the ashes cooled, the wind changed direction for the first time all day. It blew softly eastward. Weeks passed. No more strange dreams. The lottery streak slowed, then stopped. Auntie Lan reported that the rice never spoiled again, and the girl in the blue skirt, no one saw her. But Master Wu's warning remained etched in everyone's mind. The land is in energetic conflict with the land. Unless balanced, it will demand another proxy in 10 years. This wasn't a haunting. It was a debt. Not personal, but tied to the soil itself. A deep fracture in the place's spiritual veins. The Zhaos took no chances. They upgraded the offering altar into a permanent shrine, whitewashed the northern wall, and invited Master Nun Jingyi back each month for a private chant. Madame Zhao even had a small plaque carved to the ones who stayed too long. To the ones we failed to see, may you find your way and never be left behind again. Then, on the 10th anniversary of the fire, something unexpected happened. Auntie Lan, now retired, but visiting for the ceremony, called Madame Zhao aside. "I dreamed of him last night," she said. "He was taller, looked like a man now." Madame Zhao hesitated. "Was he upset?" "No." He said, "Thank you." He said, "He's not cold anymore." The day after Auntie Lan shared her dream, a kind of quiet reverence spread through the factory. No one made jokes about ghosts. No one questioned if it had all been imagination. Everyone simply accepted that something had happened, something beyond explanation. But not beyond respect, Madame Zhao continued her offerings. At this point, the shrine wasn't just about Chen Alex. It was for all the spirits that had passed through the factory's bones over the decades. The man in the forklift accident, the welder who fell from scaffolding, even the girl in the blue skirt no one had ever confirmed as real. Madame Zhao didn't care. If a name wasn't known, she whispered child or friend instead. But one memory kept tugging at her. A few months after the fire, Auntie Li Jiaomei's youngest aunt came to visit from the countryside. Over tea, she casually mentioned something she hadn't realized was important at the time. "I came by that week before the fire, remember," she said. "I lit a stick of incense at the old altar by the gate. The wind was calm, but out of nowhere it gusted so hard the statue of Guan Yu toppled and shattered. Guan Yu, the revered Chinese god of loyalty and war, often placed near doors to ward off evil. His statue had guarded the factory's gate for years until that one moment. They hadn't known then what it meant. But now looking back, it felt like a warning, or a rupture. Something had snapped that day, and 10 days later the fire came. And with it a life lost, a proxy taken. Still, the most remarkable part of the story wasn't the haunting, it was what happened after. The factory didn't just survive, it flourished. By 2011, orders were up. By 2013, they opened a second processing line. No more breakdowns, no unexplained malfunctions. Competitors, some who had once mocked them, struggled to keep up. Even the workers stayed longer, turnover almost disappeared. When asked why, many would just say, "It feels lighter here." Some credited Madame Zhao's care. Others said it was the new management system. But the older workers knew. They'd seen what happened. They remembered the whispers and the dreams. and the boy who smiled in the dark. Meanwhile, Master Wu remained in occasional contact. He came once a year, quietly checking the energy flow of the land, murmuring under his breath as he walked the property's edge. He never asked for money, only a cup of hot tea and 3 sticks of incense to burn at dusk. And then there was Master Nun Jingyi, who continued her monthly visits. She once told Madame Zhao, some spirits stay not out of anger, but out of loyalty. When you feed them, they feed you back. It sounded strange then, but it made sense now. In time, the family learned something new. A distant relative traced the land's deeper history. Long before the factory, the site had been a resting ground for displaced families during wartime. The drainage ditch behind the property had once been a burial spot for an unmarked body, possibly. A woman, possibly a child. No records remained. What they had called a curse may have simply been a forgotten story trying to surface. And Chen Alix, just a boy, unlucky, soft-spoken. Fond of scratch-off tickets and instant noodles was the last piece of that tale. Not a villain, not even a tragic figure. Just someone caught in the path of a broken pattern. His mother, Madame Chen, still stopped by once or twice a year. She'd bring oranges or tea, place them at the shrine bow silently, then leave. One time, Zhao Mei caught up with her at the gate and said gently, "We never forgot him." Madame Chen smiled. Her face had grown older, but her eyes were clear. Neither did he. By the time the 10th year arrived, the workers gathered again not to mourn, but to light lanterns. Red ones this time. No black, no white. Just warmth. Some cried, others prayed. But mostly they told stories about how Alex once fell asleep in the warehouse and got locked in, or how he used to hum pop songs while sweeping. When the final lantern floated up into the sky, Zhao Mei whispered, "If you're still watching, you can go now." But deep down, she hoped he stayed just long enough to see the factory whole again. Years had passed since the fire, and yet there remained moments when the air in the factory carried something more than dust. It wasn't fear anymore. It was reverence, an unspoken acknowledgement that life and death had crossed paths here, and that such things leave traces. On the 13th anniversary of the fire, Zhao Mei found herself alone at the altar just after sunset. Her parents had gone to visit relatives, and most of the factory had closed early. She lit incense, like always, placed 2 steamed buns beside the small porcelain bowl, and poured fresh water into the offering cup. As the smoke rose, she thought of Chen Alex, not just as the boy who died, but as someone who had, in a strange way, protected everyone after. Then, just as she turned to leave, a faint knocking echoed from the direction of the machine room. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 soft taps. She didn't investigate. She only whispered, "I heard you," and bowed one last time. Later that night, Madame Zhao returned with news. She had run into Master Wu at the herbal shop downtown. He had been traveling, visiting other provinces, but still kept track of certain places. He told her something she wouldn't forget. The land is calmer now, but peace must be maintained. Never forget to feed what cannot ask. It was a principle Zhao Mei had come to live by. After that, the shrine became more than a ritual. It was a part of the factory's structure, like a furnace or a water line. No one called it superstition. It was simply there, and it was part of why the lights stayed on, and the workers felt safe. And as the years went by, something curious happened. The story of the fire began to shift, not in fact, but in tone. New workers didn't speak of ghosts. They spoke of the boy who watches over the night shift. They joked that the vending machine never jammed because Alex hated waiting. When someone misplaced tools and found them mysteriously back in place the next day, they blamed the kid, but always with a smile. In a strange twist of fate, Chen Alex became part of the factory's mythos, not as a specter to be feared, but as a presence woven into its survival. He was the reason the late shifts weren't so lonely. The reason the lottery booth down the street always had at least one winner from their team. And his mother, Madame Chen, finally found peace too. Each year she brought a single white chrysanthemum and a can of iced coffee, his favorite. She'd place them before the altar, sit on the edge of the concrete path, and sometimes hum the song he used to play on his old MP3 player. Zhao Mei once asked if she ever dreamed of him. No, the woman said softly. And that's how I know he's okay now. One autumn evening, after a particularly quiet month, the power flickered briefly. When it returned, all the clocks in the factory had reset not to midnight, but to 10:10 p.m. It was the exact time Chen Alex's body had been discovered years ago. No one made a big deal of it. They just replaced the batteries, lit the incense an hour early, and whispered their thanks. And from then on, whenever someone new joined the factory team, Zhao Mei would tell them just one thing. This place runs on work, yes, but it also runs on memory. Respect both. Because if there's one thing they had all come to understand, it's this. Some debts don't disappear. Some lives echo louder after death. And some curses, when faced with care, can be transformed into something else entirely. The horror stories of the East never truly end.
That was their story. Maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. But tonight, when the lights go out, just remember, not every silence means you're alone. New true horror stories every week. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have a story of your own, send it to us. You're not the only one who's seen things.